The streaming numbers landed with a thud, not a bang. When the data finally surfaced, it told a story no amount of spin could soften. Meghan Markle's lifestyle series failed to break through Netflix's rankings in any meaningful way, settling far outside the platform's competitive tier. In an ecosystem where even modest curiosity can propel a show into visibility, this result stood out, not as controversy, but as indifference. In the entertainment business, indifference is the most unforgiving verdict of all. For months, the project had been framed as a major reinvention, a fresh chapter, a return to relevance through warmth, wellness, and aspirational living. But when the audience numbers arrived, the disconnect between expectation and reality became impossible to ignore. Viewership plateaued early, momentum never materialized, and follow-up episodes failed to gain traction. This wasn't a slow burn, it was a stall. Inside Netflix, the reaction was less emotional and more procedural. Streaming platforms operate on brutal efficiency. Performance determines priority, and priority determines survival. When a show underperforms, the question isn't why, it's whether continued investment makes sense. In this case, the answer became clear quickly. What transformed a disappointing release into an industry cautionary tale wasn't the failure itself. Plenty of shows fail. What raised eyebrows was the reported response behind closed doors. According to multiple accounts from individuals familiar with the situation, frustration turned confrontational. Rather than recalibrating strategy or accepting the outcome, demands were allegedly made that went far beyond creative concerns. Executives were reportedly pressed to intervene in personal reputation matters unrelated to content delivery. In effect, a business relationship was treated as a shield against external narratives. That miscalculation proved costly. Streaming platforms are distributors, not guardians. They sell content, not personal narratives. The expectation that corporate leadership would manage or suppress unrelated media coverage reportedly left executives stunned. In an industry built on boundaries, legal, creative, and financial, this kind of pressure is not just inappropriate, it's alarming. One insider later described the atmosphere as tense and bewildering. The perception, they said, was that celebrity status had been mistaken for leverage. But leverage in Hollywood doesn't come from fame alone. It comes from performance. And performance was precisely what was missing. The irony did not go unnoticed. Years earlier, similar complaints had been leveled against royal institutions for failing to provide protection from negative press. Now, a private company was being cast in the same role. Different setting, same expectation, that powerful entities exist to manage personal fallout. But corporations don't operate on loyalty. They operate on metrics. As the weeks passed, it became clear the relationship was winding down. Promotion slowed, enthusiasm evaporated. Internally, the project became shorthand for a lesson executives didn't want to repeat. What happens when branding outpaces substance? What followed next revealed just how decisively Netflix had moved on. Rather than reinvesting in fresh production for later episodes, the platform reportedly relied on already shot material to fulfill contractual obligations. No expanded budget, no additional shoots, no renewed creative push. The goal wasn't revival, it was closure. This approach is rare for talent once heralded as transformational. Netflix is known for doubling down when it believes in a property. When it doesn't, it cuts with precision. The message was unmistakable. Confidence had evaporated. Publicly, optimism was maintained, claims circulated of massive ancillary success, products sold, influence exerted, brands boosted. But internally, those assertions carried little weight. If the show had driven meaningful engagement or revenue, the calculus would have changed. Platforms track everything. Renewals follow results. The absence of renewals spoke louder than any press release. Industry analysts noted something else equally telling. Even controversy failed to move the needle. In entertainment, scandal often fuels curiosity. Audiences tune in not because they admire, but because they want to see. Yet, even amid surrounding drama, viewership remains stagnant. That suggested something more damaging than backlash. It suggested apathy. One executive reportedly summarized it bluntly: people weren't angry enough to watch. That realization triggered deeper concern, because apathy isn't something marketing can fix. You can't manufacture interest where none exists. As Netflix quietly disengaged, the broader industry took note. Hollywood is a small town with a long memory. Executives talk, agents compare notes, reputations form quickly and stick stubbornly. Stories began circulating, not about numbers, but about behavior, about meetings that went sideways, about expectations that didn't align with reality, about an inability to separate personal grievance from professional obligation. These stories travel fast. At the same time, Prince Harry was facing his own reckoning, this one in a courtroom thousands of miles away. His legal battles with the British press had been framed as principled stands against intrusion. But inside the courtroom, the performance reportedly undermined the message. Observers noted that emotional testimony repeatedly veered off course. Judges are not audiences. They require precision, not catharsis. When answers become speeches, credibility suffers. The contrast between the intended narrative and the legal outcome was stark. What was meant to be a defining stand ended abruptly, leaving more questions than conclusions. The timing couldn't have been worse. While one half of the partnership faced professional collapse, the other was absorbing legal costs with no clear payoff. Litigation is expensive, draining, and slow. It consumes attention and energy, resources already in short supply. Critics began to ask whether the strategy itself had become self-defeating. Fighting every perceived injustice may feel righteous, but it rarely builds futures. It preserves grievances, not opportunities. Behind the scenes, financial pressure mounted. Security costs, legal fees, property upkeep, all ongoing expenses with diminishing income streams to offset them. The lifestyle remained lavish, the revenue did not. Against this backdrop, reports emerged of yet another pivot: fashion, beauty, lifestyle branding. Again. To some, it sounded familiar. Reinvention had become a cycle. When one industry cooled, attention shifted to another. But reinvention without introspection rarely yields different results. Fashion insiders reacted cautiously. Style influence is earned over time through consistency, authenticity, and connection. Wearing clothes is not the same as shaping culture. Attending shows does not equal belonging to the industry. What unsettled many was the reported expectations surrounding fashion collaborations. Designers typically loan garments for appearances and shoots, expecting their return. According to multiple accounts, that norm was challenged. Items were reportedly treated as permanent acquisitions, justified by claims of security or value. In fashion, where inventory is tightly controlled and often irreplaceable, this approach caused friction. Some houses quietly declined future collaboration rather than risk loss. Relationships cooled, doors closed. The comparison that reportedly circulated between modern celebrity influence and historic royal iconography only deepened concern. Cultural relevance cannot be assumed. It is granted by the public, not declared by the individual. Meanwhile, personal relationships frayed. Former allies distanced themselves. Attempts to leverage high-profile friendships for credibility reportedly failed. In one notable case, outreach to a globally respected celebrity family went unanswered. Old accusations had left scars that hadn't healed. Silence in this context was not passive, it was deliberate. As bridges burned, isolation increased. The circle narrowed, the echo chamber grew louder. Observers began to notice the toll this dynamic took on Prince Harry. Photographs captured a man who looked worn down, older than his years, carrying visible strain. Commentators speculated that constant conflict, legal, familial, public, had become a way of life. Bitterness, as the saying goes, is corrosive. Rather than stabilizing each other, sources suggested the couple amplified grievances. Every criticism became proof. Every setback became betrayal. There was no break, no moderating voice urging recalibration. In that environment, growth becomes nearly impossible. The Montecito estate, once marketed as a sanctuary, increasingly resembled a fortress, beautiful but isolating. Opportunities dwindled, invitations slowed, the world moved on. Netflix's silence became emblematic of a broader shift. The platform that once championed the partnership now avoided mention entirely. No defense, no nostalgia, just distance. In Hollywood, that is the final signal. Spotify had already exited, publishing projects stalled, media goodwill thinned. Each industry departure narrowed the next set of options. Reinvention relies on trust, and trust erodes when patterns repeat. Still, confidence remained unshaken, at least outwardly. Plans continued, announcements loomed, the belief that the next venture would finally land. Self-belief can be powerful, but when it detaches entirely from feedback, it becomes delusion. The question many now ask is not whether another attempt will be made. It will. The question is how many opportunities remain. Industries are forgiving once, sometimes twice, rarely more.